Hey guys, it's another ATP Finals preview and prediction video for Carlos Alcaraz versus Andrey Rublev. The two have never met before, so this is going to be an intriguing matchup to get into. Before we do, though, remember to that like button, do subscribe if you're new, and do leave a rating or review if you're listening on a podcast platform. Okay, first of all, we are going to be covering this, by the way, tomorrow, so do make sure that you tune in for the live stream watch along. I can only imagine it's going to be very exciting. We're going to have two players playing extremely aggressive tennis. And look, I mean, who doesn't love two big hitters going at it? So, what we're going to do first is we're going to talk a little bit about the only matches that they played so far, with Alcaraz losing to Zverev in a very tight three-set match, and then Rublev getting comprehensively outbeaten by Medvedev, who, to be fair, had a very, very, very good match. Zverev also played a very high level, in all fairness, but the head-to-head between Zverev and Alcaraz is a lot closer, and it's 4-all now. Whereas Rublev's only beaten him twice. I think the head-to-head is now 8-2 in favor of Medvedev. So, yes, Rublev beat Medvedev last year in Turin on these courts, but I think we can all agree that Medvedev, the level that he showed yesterday against Rublev or the day before, in comparison to what he showed last year against Rublev, two very different things. So we're going to talk a little bit about how they both played in those matches, and then because we don't have any matches between the two to look at, we're then going to dive straight into tactically and technically how it might play out, what I think might transpire, and then we will ultimately, or I will ultimately, give you guys my prediction as to who I think is going to win. So let's talk a little bit about their performances. So let's start with Carlos Alcaraz because he is very inexperienced still on indoor hard courts. And look, I mean, the same, to be fair, was the case at Wimbledon on grass. He'd only played, I think it was 10 matches, if not even less, on the green stuff. On indoor hard court, he is similarly very inexperienced. Now, there is a slight issue with the surface not, in my opinion anyway, being the most conducive to his style of play currently as a player. Now, he will evolve. He'll continue to evolve as a player. Yes, he is one of, if not the most complete player that we've seen of his age anyway, in my lifetime anyway. But there's still room for improvement, and we know that. And we'll get into that in a second. But the surface is definitely something that he's trying to get to grips with. He said after his loss to Zverev that the courts were extremely fast in comparison to other hard courts that they have on the tour currently on the ATP side. And he actually thinks that the other courts are extremely slow in comparison to these Turin courts. Now, there's two things I want to quickly mention on that. Number one is I do agree these courts are definitely faster than the majority of hard courts on tour. But and I think his point was that the other courts maybe there should be more variety on tour so that this isn't such a big surprise. But it shouldn't be an issue in the sense that all the players are having to play on this surface. So yes, some of the players who played last year, Alcaraz didn't play on it last year. They'll be used to it, I guess, or more used to it. They have more experience on it. But it's the same for everyone. It's the same for everyone, and there are going to be some surfaces that suit certain types of styles more than others. Like we know, clay will suit the returners, the players who are able to grind more, high topspin, high shot tolerance. Generally speaking, use their forehands a lot and have potent forehands. Whereas if you think about very fast courts, then there's more emphasis on serve, there's more emphasis on transition game at times, and also big aggressive ground strokes. Whereas clay is more the defensive capabilities. There's more onus on that and more, I would say, reward for being that type of player. So there's differences, right? As there should be on a tour. You don't want all the surfaces to play the same. So the fact that this is a fast hardcore, for me anyway, is a really, really positive thing. I do get though that he might be saying that, look, this is very, very different though to what we have on tour. So maybe there needs to be some sort of, I guess, look at the hard courts on tour. Are they too samey? Are they too slow? Generally speaking, does there need to be more variety when it comes to the hard courts? Because to be fair, some of the hard courts on tour are actually slower than a clay court. That to me is just ludicrous, in all honesty. So the surface, now we're talking about surface. The reason why I wanted to bring that up is because I think it shows one that he's not particularly comfortable with the speed of court, and that showed against Zverev. Yes, he's still put in a really good performance, and he is a great player, so he's still going to be able to fight and make it close. But he was struggling with Zverev's serve, which is always going to be extremely potent on a fast indoor hard court. There's no wind, there's no sun, there's no external circumstances or you know, anything outside in terms of outdoor conditions. He's indoors. It's still conditions. It's perfect serving for someone like Zverev, who just is able to generate a lot of pace behind his serve and hit his spots, and he has so many different variations as well on serve. And his stats of 16 aces, 2 double faults probably highlights that and emphasizes the point that he was more comfortable serving because he only served 2 double faults. Now, that's a very good day at the office for someone like him, who is very prone to double faulting. Alcaraz actually was 11 aces and 2 double faults, so he also was in double figures when it came to aces. So that's a positive that he was still able to get purchased though on his serve, which is good because his serve, I would say, is arguably the weakest serve, in my opinion anyway, of the field at this ATP Finals. I think it's the weakest, and that's just how I see it at the moment. But he had a good serving day against Zverev. Now, in terms of how he fared and like how did he looked rushed in a lot of the rallies. Zverev, to be fair, played a really high standard, as I said, and he was confident to hit through the court. Alcaraz looked rushed in a lot of exchanges, and that was highlighted by the amount of times that he was shanking the forehand, missed time in the forehand. There's a lot of forehands that went long, or he framed them, or he just looked like he was off balance when hitting them. Now, his game is built upon being aggressive with his not just his ground strokes, but with his feet. And he just felt like he wasn't quite able to get into rhythm with his movement, and that is a real key in his game. Also, the drop shot wasn't quite as potent, and I think again that is something to do with the course a little bit because in some instances where he would have been able to time the drop shot a lot better, you just felt like the time was a little bit off. And the same could be said with his returning. I think there were some instances where again you'd expect him to make those returns, but actually he was struggling. And I get it's going to be harder, generally speaking, anyway, on these faster courts to return. But he was not making returns that I still would have expected him to, even though the courts are as quick as they are. So something that he should be able to take the experience out from that Zverev match. And I think because it was 3 sets, that's almost a positive thing. It's meant that he's had more time on the court to then come into this Rublev match where Rublev isn't as big a server. Yes, he hits a big ball from the back of the court, but generally speaking, he should be able to at least adapt a bit more. So, in my opinion, in my opinion anyway, I think he should be a bit more comfortable on the surface because he's just now got this little bit more experience. And I do think, as I said, Rublev, yes, he hits a heavy ball, but I just think that he's not. He's still pretty comfortable indoors, but Zverev is almost like, in my opinion, I think indoor hardcourt is his best surface. That's my opinion. I don't know if that's quite the case for Rublev. I would argue it's actually clay courts. Then we need to talk about. So let's stick with Alcaraz, right? Let's stick with Alcaraz. We've talked pretty generally about his game, and we've also then talked about his mentality as well. Another thing that he mentioned was being mentally fatigued, and that's why he thinks for the first time he's lost 3 matches in a row, for the first time since I think it's 2021 on the ATP Tour. Now, these aren't. Again, I haven't listened to the entirety of all of these interviews, so I'm taking sound bites or bite-sized chunks of what he's been saying. If the context is correct, though, then these are not particularly positive comments like about the surface, about his how he's feeling in terms of fatigue, mental fatigue. In my opinion, it's a little bit alarming. Now, I'm not saying that he's making massive excuses or he's completely giving up. No, I mean he did say even on Instagram I saw a post and he said, look, it wasn't a result I wanted, but I'll come back strong on Wednesday. The best thing about this tournament is that you can lose the first match and still make the semi-finals, or you can lose a match and still make the semi-finals, and he's right in saying that. So I think he will be in decent spirits. I just think he's a very honest young man. So let's then talk about Rublev's performance against Medvedev, and then I'm going to talk about tactically how it's going to play out. So Rublev was thoroughly outplayed by Medvedev, and unfortunately, what played out was actually a very similar type of match to what we've seen in the past between the two. And I thought it would be different because of what happened last year at the tournament when Rublev won in 3 sets. Instead, they kind of fell into their old patterns, and Medvedev actually, in my opinion, was very impressive. 10 aces for him. What actually really impressed me though was the fact that he hit 24 winners to 6 unforced errors, and he came to the net 8 times, won 7 out of those 8 net points. Again, that's very impressive for someone like him who isn't the most at home at the net. But yeah, I mean, 4 times the amount of winners to unforced errors is pretty much, I mean, we're talking about crazy numbers here. On Rublev's front, 19 winners to 30 unforced errors, a pretty good return on the net points one as well at 16 out of 20. The issue that he had was he was serving at 66% first serves in, which is okay, but only winning 62% of his first serve points and only 39% of his second serve points won. 2 aces and 2 double faults, so not an amazing return in all honesty on serve. So he needs to improve his serving performance against Alcaraz. Alcaraz definitely won't return as well as Medvedev. I think we can safely say that. So he should get some more free points, I would suggest, on serve. Medvedev played really well, so I wouldn't look too much into Rublev's performance. And uh, the one thing I will say is that I do think he's more comfortable from the back of the court with his timing wise on ground strokes than Alcaraz. He doesn't look as rushed. Again, though, I wouldn't say it's his best surface. Similar to Alcaraz, I think Alcaraz's best surface is arguably maybe a slow hard court or a kind of faster clay court is the real sweet spot. We know he's good on all surfaces though, because at Wimbledon he won there, which is a quicker court. US Open he's won as well, and we know he's good on clay. He's won multiple titles there as well. But I'd argue actually that indoor hard court is his weakest at the moment, currently anyway. For Rublev, I'm not sure whether it's his weakest, but it's definitely not his strongest. But he's had success indoors, especially recently as well. And he was impressive in the Shanghai Masters, which I thought was a very very good run to the final where he lost to Hubert Catch in a very tight match. So I think the faster hard courts, he's got to grips with it, which is a real positive. He needs to be very aggressive, but calculated his aggression against Alcaraz because he should be able to rush him with his hammer type forehand. But yeah, against Medvedev, he was just kind of run ragged a little bit. And in the previous exchanges between the two, the match that he did win last year was because in the forehand to forehand, he was dominating those rallies. He was dictating, and Medvedev was struggling. But actually, Medvedev's forehand was really good, and he was changing direction first, going line with really good depth as well. I was actually very impressed with his forehand against Rublev. We'll talk about that in more detail when I do the Medvedev Zverev preview, which will be a separate video to this one. But yeah, let's then break down tactically because we talked a little bit about how they've looked in both matches. So there's going to be a few keys for both players, in my opinion. Forehand to forehand, we're going to see some hammer blows. Let's be honest, and we're going to see some incredible rallies forehand to forehand. They're going to be absolutely crunching it. I think it's going to be incredible to watch, and almost like watching a ping pong or a table tennis rally in the forehand to forehand. Backhand to backhand will be interesting because I think Alcaraz has not looked super comfortable on his backhand in the tournament so far, and also with Rublev even. His backhand has become more reliable, no doubt, and he defends that side a little bit better, but it's a work in progress. I'm intrigued to see how he holds up against Alcaraz's backhand. I would imagine Alcaraz gets the better of those rallies despite the surface and his experience and how he's been feeling in terms of rhythm. Forehand to forehand, Rublev actually might be okay because Alcaraz has been misfiring a little bit on the forehand, and it just really depends on how he's looking rhythm wise. The question I think for me is going to come down more to actually how the serve return dynamic works out because the points are so much shorter in this tournament. So serve becomes a lot more important. And if Alcaraz can serve how he served against Zverev, he'll put himself in a good position. Rublev is not an incredible returner, so he'll get some free points, no doubt, from Rublev. Rublev needs to be solid on his returns and at least ask the questions as much as possible of Alcaraz. He will be prone to making mistakes on this surface, just in general, sorry, even uh, because of how he's been playing recently. And I don't think it's necessarily a slump, but I do think there has been a slight dip in level, and he's admitted himself. So he's there in the sense I don't want to say he's there for the taking, but he is definitely vulnerable. And so Rublev needs to make sure that he's being as proactive as possible. What I would say as well is that Alcaraz did not like getting pushed back by Zverev. And generally speaking, I don't think he likes getting pushed back for large periods of matches. Rublev has the ability to do that with his forehand and just with his general all-round play. If he's able to serve big with that first serve and then push with the forehand as well, push Alcaraz back, it's going to feel uncomfortable because Alcaraz will want to take the ball on the baseline. He won't want to get pushed back because he knows the angles that will open up on these faster courts is then very difficult to recover defensively, despite how good someone like Alcaraz is with his movement and his athleticism. So that's going to be intriguing. Alcaraz will actually want to push Rublev back instead and try and open up the drop shot, and then obviously the lob in turn with that, and also try and open up angles. And so that'll be intriguing to see because I don't think either player is going to stand very far back. So I don't think we're going to see a huge amount of serve volley. We might see from Alcaraz occasionally. Rublev probably won't serve and volley. But what we are going to see is both players trying to go big with their serve plus one combos, especially Rublev with the forehand and Alcaraz with that forehand as well. And both, I would imagine both players ideally will want to go big into the backhand as early as possible because they won't want to get hurt with the opponent's forehand. So there's going to be a little bit of symmetry between the two players at times, I think, when we watch it, and that'll be intriguing to see who kind of blinks first, who's able to have the higher quality ground strokes in the exchanges and in the rallies, and who's also able to use their tennis IQ better. Because I think Alcaraz has got an incredible tennis IQ. Rublev also has I would say, an underrated tennis IQ, in all honesty. And I think what Alcaraz does very well, generally speaking, is disrupt rhythm with opponents by hitting different types of spin and slice and pace. And what Rublev feeds off beautifully is the same consistent ball coming back to him, and he's able then to set himself and really unleash on the ground stroke. So if Alcaraz, which I think he will do, especially with the backhand slice, which I saw him utilize against Zverev, especially the backhand slice down the line, so that forehand at times, and he utilized it to pretty good effect, I thought, against Zverev, and I think Rublev is another candidate to use it against. So that would be intriguing. He also went big into the Zverev forehand for his serve and really exploited the forehand return when he could. Rublev's weaker return is the backhand from what I've seen, so he'll probably go more on the ad side, for example. He'll go out wide and then from the juice side down the tee a lot more than he did against Zverev. He'll try and mix it up, of course, as well. For Rublev, I mean, Alcaraz's return quality on both wings is pretty balanced, I would say. So he just needs to make sure that Alcaraz is not reading the serve and he can't anticipate it. He needs to make sure that he's making him guess, and that'll be intriguing to see how Rublev executes that. Because the problem that you have when you face someone like Alcaraz is that you can drag them out with angles with your serve, and then you'll go into the open space, and he will somehow get there and pass you with incredible speed. Now, the one thing that might be going against him in these types of scenarios, though, nowadays or in this tournament, is that the courts are so quick that even someone as athletic and as quick as him might not be able to still get to these balls. And that's where Rublev needs to be clinical. He doesn't necessarily need to hit lines, but he needs to hit the ball clean and use big targets, but try and open up the court as much as possible. And that's exactly what Alcaraz will try to do as well against Rublev. And Rublev needs to be smart. Sometimes, and I think Alcaraz already does this. Rublev, I've seen him do it occasionally, but sometimes he gets carried away. Rather than saying, okay, I'm being dragged out a little bit on the forehand side, rather than saying, let me just go bigger and bigger and bigger, but actually not generate more width or angle, think, okay, maybe I'll take a little bit off, but I'll generate a bit more topspin. I'll find that angle, try and drag him out, and try and be smart to then be the first one to go line with my forehand. So I do think the forehand to forehand exchange is going to be really key. I definitely, and I think the serve return dynamic is also going to be crucial. I think Alcaraz will have more success against Rublev's serve, no doubt, than obviously he did against Zverev's. Rublev needs to have a good serving day. I think, as does Alcaraz, and I think in the rallies, it's going to be intriguing who comes out on top. But I have a feeling that even though I really do like Rublev, and I initially picked him to make it out of the group, after watching Alcaraz against Zverev, I don't. Even though he didn't play his best, he didn't play as badly as I thought he could. Rublev's performance against Medvedev wasn't great, but there is definitely a caveat there in terms of a matchup of styles. I think Rublev can cause Alcaraz problems, but I'm going to go with Alcaraz just because I think he's got the variety to potentially stifle Rublev's, very explosive type of game style. And I'm going to go Alcaraz in 3 sets. That's my prediction. Let me know in the chat what you think. Thank you very much, guys. Stay safe and well, and we'll see you in the next video.